One of the biggest mistakes I see travel photographers make with their photography is to not make the best use of the photos they already have. This might look like you going through your photos and saying, that one's not good, that one's not good, or maybe this one's okay, you try a little editing, but it still doesn't look great. Well, how you get your photos to look the best they can possibly be is through editing. And the mistakes I see people make most is not to try editing at all because they just don't believe in it, they're afraid of it, or to not really make best use of all the capabilities that editing has to offer. Now, if you're not quite on board with why editing is important, make sure you watch the video I did last on why every photo needs editing. Of course, I will link to that below. But if you're here and you're excited about editing, just aren't quite sure what all it can do for you, this is a great place for you today because we're going to do an editing demo. One of my favorite things to watch and to do, because the best way to learn how to edit is to watch editing happen. All right, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Diane, and this is the PhotoFluent channel. And here I help travelers learn how to turn down the volume of their inner critic, get creative with your camera, so that you can create amazing photos that truly reflect your experiences. Photos that you can't wait to share, print, or heck, even sell. So welcome to our photo editing demo today. Now, if editing your photos, creating photos is something that you're super excited about, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications so you get notified when all the newest videos come out. What does editing look like exactly? Well, it's a wide range. You can do very light edits to just make it a little better, give it a little boost, or you can dramatically make your photo look completely different. I go somewhere in the middle. I don't change backgrounds. I don't move people around necessarily. I just enhance the photo that I have because I want the photo to give the best viewer experience possible. And what I mean by that is that I want the lighting and the coloring and I want the emphasis on the subject to be what I remember seeing. Because sometimes you're there and you see this great, beautiful scene in, say, Italy, and then you get home and look at the photo and think, that's not what I remember seeing. It's dull, it's boring. What is the subject even? That's what editing can help you with. Today, we're going to start with the global edits. And that just means when you move a slider, it affects the whole image. Join me on this little editing session of global edits in Lightroom and see what you think. Well, here we are over in Lightroom, and I'm going to just show you a few quick edits that you can use in photos that are pretty typical when you're traveling. And this is a good example. I went to the farmer's market last weekend just to, well, hang out at the farmer's market because it's a fun place. The energy, the produce, the colors, it's beautiful and the energy is fun. And I think it's a great place to practice travel photos because it's a very typical environment to a lot of the places that you travel in, right? So I went over there to hang out and to take photos. And this lighting situation is what you get a lot of times when you're traveling, right? You get this really, really bright area back here and some more shadowy areas in the front. Now, how do you expose your camera for that? Well, there's only so much you can do, right? Because you're going to have those bright and dark areas. So you can do the best you can with exposure, but then afterwards in Lightroom, here's what you do. First thing I'm going to do is look at this and think, that's too bright in the background. So I'm going to pull down my highlights, maybe even all the way. And do I want to bring the shadows up a little bit? Maybe. Whites and blacks is how I give it some contrast. I bring those blacks down. And then the midtones are what give it that extra pop. When people say, I want the wow, I want the pop, the midtones, the clarity is what gives you that in addition to the contrast, right?
I also like vibrance, especially since we have all these flowers here. This can go a little crazy, so I'm going to be careful when I use that slider. And the thing with Lightroom is just play with the sliders. Go back and forth and see what effect it has on your photos. That's what I suggest. Take it to the point where you think that's crazy, it looks awful, and then pull it back until it looks good. I generally do that. I take it with clarity, for example. I'm going to take it all the way to where it looks weird, then I pull it back down to where it starts to look good. Okay? So you can see, here's my before and after. Few subtle differences made a pretty big difference. Just look at the background on the left and how blown out it is. And on the right, suddenly you can see some details over there. And it just helps bring a little more focus to our subjects, who are these two ladies in the front picking the flowers. One more quick edit that I think is really helpful. The sliders I showed you, these are global edits, right? They affect the whole photo. We're only going to talk about global edits in this video. The next one we'll get a little more into the local. But global, when you slide that slider back and forth, the whole photo is changed. So highlights, all the highlights in the whole photo are affected. All the shadows are affected. And if you do the exposure slider, that is the entire exposure of it gets brighter. All areas brighter, all areas darker. And that's one reason I don't do that one first. That's my little trick. Anyway, let's move on to that other thing I wanted to show you, my little secret. If you go down here to effects, see that highlight priority? If you bring, the post crop vignetting, it's a vignette. That's just the type of vignette. And I just leave it there. I don't mess with that a whole lot. But if you bring it down like this, we're going to do it extreme just to show you. Look how it brings the focus of the viewer in towards the center. So here are my subjects in the center. If I don't have a vignette, your eyes kind of get pulled around. There's a lot going on. The vignette just helps pull it in. I always feather it so it's very subtle. And then I slide it around. I don't want it to be super obvious. I just want it to be subtle. And see, now, you wouldn't just as a viewer look at this and think, wow, she really vignetted that. You don't think about the vignette. It's just there, pulling your eyes into the center. Let's look at that before and after. See the difference? Voila. And how long did that take me? Now, I was chatting while I did it, so it took a little bit longer. But if you look at the sliders, ching, 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 few minutes tops, and your photo is more scroll stopping, right? I think so. Okay, we're going to do one more just to show you a different kind of photo. Now, in this, flowers, produce, anything that you have a repeating pattern in like this. It's sometimes hard to get a photo that's interesting because your viewer doesn't know where to look. There are peaches everywhere. What do I look at? So I generally recommend you kind of pick one as your hero, as the subject. And this little guy right here is the one that I thought was in a good position. He has some different colors. So that's the one I really focused on, literally, and as the kind of feature of my photo. So I used it to shallow depth the field so you can see this one is in focus, but some of these back here are blurred. Even the foreground are blurred. But how do you bring the eye into this photo? Well, or into this peach? Only using global edits, because that's what we're talking about today. Do I need to bring in highlights? Not really, because this is under a tint, so that tint kind of filters the highlights. And I don't think we need to bring up shadows either, but I want it to be brighter. So I don't start with exposure like I mentioned. I go right for the whites, and I'm going to bring the blacks down. That gives us some contrast. I'm going to bring clarity in to give the midtones a little bump. And I'm going to give it some vibrance. Now, some of these look a little extreme, I'd say, and I don't like it that extreme. So see, I just kind of fiddle until it gets to be where I want it. Now, here's the other adjustment that I'm going to do. Some of these bright spots up here are distracting, and I want the photo just to really be filled with peaches. The frame to frame, all about peaches. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to crop it. And cropping is something that can help your composition. right? So you have composition in mind generally when you take the photo, but it doesn't always hit the mark exactly like you wanted it to. Or you miss something in the frame, like at the corner or something. So by cropping, I can just kind of pull this in and really bring that hero peach right to where I want it. So now I've got peaches everywhere. I got my little hero right where I want it. What's the other thing I might do here? Well, after I did the whites and the darks, I might try the exposure at that point to see if I want it a little brighter. I don't think I do. I'm going to leave that alone. Now, let's go down here to effects, to my vignette, and that's going to help bring my focus to this hero even more. I'm going to exaggerate, I'm going to feather, and then I'm going to pull it back to where it's not super obvious. Okay, let's look at my before and after here. It's subtle, right? But look at the difference in where your eyes go. On the left, your eyes kind of go around to the brighter peaches. They might skip over your hero, even though that's the one that's mostly focused. Where now on the right, because of the vignette and because of the positioning and the lighting, it's a little more obvious where my hero is, and it just gives a little better path through the photo. So you see it's all peaches, but there's one especially that you kind of start with as you're journeying through the little peach pile.
Okay, welcome back. Wasn't that exciting? Just a few little adjustments with those sliders can make a really dramatic difference, or a subtle difference. Whatever you want your photos to do, what you want them to look like, you're the artist. So I hope this demo helped you understand it doesn't have to be really hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think a lot of things can be harder because we make it harder. So hopefully the demo showed you the potential of Lightroom, and in the next video, you'll have to make sure you tune in because we're going to be doing the local adjustments, which is a little bit more in depth and super fun. So in the meantime, if you're still using auto mode on your camera, let's not do that anymore. You're not making full potential of your camera, of you as a photographer, or of the potential for editing. So make sure you watch this video to learn how to move out of automatic mode so that you're good and ready to jump into editing. Be ready for the next video. I'll see you very soon.